There are many things that brushes can do for us, but there's some things that a brush just can't do, but a palette knife can. Let me show you one of them. One thing is just absolutely practically impossible to do with a brush is to make a nice, thin, crisp, straight line. But if you maneuver it just right, you can do it with a palette knife. Now, the shape of the palette knife does matter. It works better if the palette knife, I find it works better if you use one of these little palette knives. They're also called painting knives. Who cares what you call them? But if you'll use this little triangular shape, that's called trowel shape, that's triangular, palette knife that is at least 2 inches long, maybe 3 inches long, depending. You can also make a nice straight line with one of these palette knives, so you can experiment with the shape of the palette knife you use. But it's not the shape so much as it is the loading of it and the way you apply it to the surface. So let me show you what I'm talking about. First, the loading. Now, to load the palette knife, well, you need to start with lots of paper towels in one hand, the palette knife in the other. The paint needs to be smoothed out. Not a big pile of paint, but it needs to be smoothed out like that. Then, cut through the paint at an angle like this. Just kind of cut upward, and depending on how thin you want the line, the thinner you want the line, the less you pull in the direction towards me. So you cut upward like that with very little movement in, and you get a thin line which you can apply like that. Now I want you to notice the application here. Let's load that one more time. Just push, turn the knife at kind of 45-degree angle and just push upward. Picks up just enough paint. You can hardly see it, a little bead of paint on the edge of the knife. Now hold it against the surface, push with barely turning it like that. Now you'll notice if you load the palette knife, push upward and then pull to the inside of the knife just a little bit, you pick up more paint. So in that case, you can make a line that's a little bit wider, or you could, or a little bit fuzzier, like that. Now, it also makes a difference as to whether you're putting that line on a dry surface or a wet surface. This is a dry surface here. I've got a surface right here that I want to wet, and so let's just make a wet surface here, and you might just how thick the paint goes on will matter too, but you can experiment with that. And now that I've got that wet surface, I have that the same color as the other one, so that means I need to go to a darker color. So I'll go right here. Now, so that I can pick that up a little bit better, I'm going to bring that dark color right over here. Once again, it needs to be a smooth, you need to smooth it out against the palette in order to load it, for it to work best. Then wipe it off and start out with an absolutely clean palette knife. Let me do that again. Now push upward like that, and notice on the wet, you see how that ends up being a cleaner line because the wet paint sort of adheres with the dry paint, so you could make a really thin clean line by working on a wet surface. I'll do that one more time, and notice how we load it. Just push the knife up into the paint like that, and then hold it on the surface at about a 45-degree angle and just push. You see, you have a nice thin clean line. And there's your quick tip.